A year ago, you and I were sitting right here, literally right here, and I remember you said that the world was standing at the edge of the abyss. And that was mostly about climate change we were talking about. Of course, things have gotten a lot more challenging since then. Are we starting to fall in? I mean, how do we describe it?
In relation to climate change, it reminds me of a Portuguese anecdote. When someone is falling from a 10th floor and arriving at the level of the second floor, so far, so good. I think that's what happened. With the war of Ukraine, climate change became a kind of a second-order issue. It's not only much less discussed, but measures that are absolutely essential to be taken are being postponed. And the result is a total disaster. Emissions are growing, and when you have a war with nature and nature is striking back, you have situations like Pakistan. 50 million people displaced, more than 1,000 people died.
Dead.
1/3 of the country covered by water. I mean, we are destroying our planet, and we are not paying attention. This climate change is being dealt now as business as usual, as if it was a small problem. And all attentions are focused on the Ukraine and a few other things. I mean, climate change is the defining challenge of our time. It must be the first priority of any government and any international organization anywhere in the world. And the fact that we are not dealing with it seriously will have irreversible consequences very soon.
The United States was doing virtually nothing in terms of new climate legislation. And then they pull a rabbit out of the hat with this misnamed Inflation Reduction Act, but still the biggest climate bill that's ever been passed historically in the US. Does this give the Americans more credibility at the upcoming COP27? Do other countries around the world see this and say, okay, we actually see progress on climate? Or is it way too little, way too late? The Americans have lost their moral authority on the issue.
I think it is a very important contribution. I'm not sure it is enough, but it's a very important contribution, especially because it came in a moment in which the climate problems seem to be forgotten. And finally, someone woke up, and here it is, a program of action aiming, among other objectives, but aiming at strengthening the climate action in the United States. And that was a very important thing. But at the present moment, we need to do much more. I mean, emissions should be reduced by 45% until 2030 if we would be able to reach carbon neutrality in 2050 and not to allow temperatures go above 1.5 degrees in relation to the historic levels. Now, emissions are growing. And the risk is, if nothing different happens in relation to what has been promised until now, the risk is that we will have an increase of emissions in 2030 of 14% instead of a decrease of 45%. If this happens, a lot of tipping points will be reached, and it will be irreversibly impossible to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. It will be irreversibly impossible to reach carbon neutrality in 2050, which means that what we are seeing today in Pakistan will be the new normal of a world that is facing destruction everywhere. And this is the last moment. 2 or 3 years we have in front of us are the last moment to revert this trend. If not, irreversible consequences will take place that will have irreparable damage in our world as we know it.